Services from the days of e-government with Maitlamo ICT policy in 2007, which aimed to transform public service delivery through technology. There has, of course, been e-government master plan 2015. There has been the smart boards initiative that was introduced to harness the fourth industrial revolution. However, there has been a lot of challenges. We know Botswana are always complaining about a lack of services, especially system it down. We can't call it any other way. So this morning we are having a conversation with John Parker. Good morning, sir. He's a data analyst and head of consulting at RPC Data Limited. Good morning.
Good morning to you, and good morning to all the listeners.
So let's talk about, first of all, understanding our current system. We talk about e-government all the time. When we effectively say e-government, what are we talking about?
Okay, I think it's very important that we actually clarify what we're talking about when we're talking about e-governance. E-governance is about it's about delivery. It's about delivery of services to the population through information and communications technology. It includes government services. It's the exchange of information and facilitates communication between the government, citizens, business, and other government agencies. Its primary aim is to improve efficiency, accessibility, and transparency of government processes while fostering greater citizen participation. And it does this by leveraging digital tools, platforms, and e-governance simplifies administrative tasks, enhances service delivery, and promotes good governance. Now, that's a very formal definition of what e-governance is all about. But basically, the bottom line is it's how do government deliver services through digital technology to the citizens of the country. So that is the bottom line. As against, on the other side, which there is some confusion sometimes between what is actually governance of IT as against e-governance. Now, governance of IT is about setting the overall direction of policies and frameworks for an organization or entity, in this case, government. Okay, excuse me. It ensures accountability and transparency and of ethical decision making. It's typically handled, in this case, by the cabinet level. They set the policies, they set the directions for government. Now, e-governance is the delivery of it, and the governance side of it is setting the policies. So you could say that the governance side is the what and the why, and the e-government is the delivery. And I think we are talking about delivery today, not the governance aspect of it. So I just wanted to get that clear.
So the governance, we were talking about the governance in the sense that the institutional and the statutory framework, which are the policies, have already been set. But we're seeing failures all the time. What is causing the disruptions? Are we efficient right now, Mr. Parker?
I think in some areas we are, and in other areas we're sadly lacking. Okay, it's very hard to be specific in terms of answering this question because it depends on your perspective. It depends on how you interact with the government as to what your perception is in terms of what they're delivering. You know, some people will say, yes, I'm very happy. Other people will say, no, this is just not right. Okay, so I think there are challenges, but it may be interesting just to look at, what are the success factors? What measures whether the e-governance policies are being implemented correctly and are they successful? And I've just made a few notes here in terms of that. It should be a citizen-centric approach, okay? It should ensuring that services meet the demands of citizens by being user-friendly, accessible, and inclusive. I think that's the primary objective. That's what we're trying to do, right? The infrastructure needs to be ready. You need to have a good infrastructure to deliver these services throughout the entirety of Botswana. There needs to be a political and administrative will to make this work. You need strong commitment from government leaders to promote and sustain the e-governance programs. Some of these are very long. You remember, they're not things that happen in 5 minutes. And they're also not something, if you like, it's like building a bridge or building a building. When you're looking at IT or e-governance, these are moving targets. Technology changes, government policies change. Therefore, governance, the way it's implemented and what it's delivering has to change in accordance with that. Remember, if you change the law on something, you may have to change the system. Right? So it's a moving target. So it's something that's living. Unlike another project, as I say, you build a bridge, it doesn't matter what the government policies are, the bridge is a bridge. When it's finished, it's finished. With IT, it's not static.
Constantly changing.
It's constantly changing. You need to build capacity. All right? You need capacity within the country, but equally within government. Okay? And you do this by educating, as simple as that. You need policies and legal framework to support e-governance. All right? I think probably the latest one about that would be the Data Protection Act, which everyone's talking about. You know, is your data safe? Are you going to give government all this information? What's it going to do with it? So you need the right policies and legal framework, which is coupled with data security and privacy. Okay, very, very important. You need interagency cooperation. You can't just have one government, everything working in silos. E-governance needs to be holistic. Agencies have to communicate with each other, not just central government, but parastatals, and in some cases, even the private sector, need to cooperate to deliver e-governance as effectively as possible throughout the country. You need monitoring and feedback. As I said to you, it's a moving target. It's continuous improvement. You need to do something, you need to look at it, you need to evaluate what you've done, say, right, how can we improve this? Let's modify it, let's move forward. Let's learn from our mistakes. Also, let's look at new technology. What is happening? Can we incorporate that into the policies?
All right. Before we even go to maintenance and monitoring and evaluation, is our infrastructure sufficient to be able to run e-government? I've been listening to you, John, talking about accessibility has to be there, and it has to be the entirety of Botswana. But we're dealing with a country that is hugely centralized in urban areas and not really have the ability to give services or at an equal level in rural areas. So is our infrastructure sufficient to effectively deliver e-governance?
I think the short answer to that is it is still lacking in certain areas. However, great improvements have been made over the years. Okay, one of the cornerstones of government policy is in fact to make sure that internet is available throughout the country. And they're trying to roll that out as quickly as possible to all schools and use those as a hub. Okay, so that services can be made available to the villages and populace surrounding the schools. It's always a challenge. You know, it's fairly easy to run a fiber network within Gaborone. And when you get out into places like Hansi and Sabong, it's a totally different kettle of fish. You know, and I think there the emphasis is using mobile. And I think the recent introduction of Starlink also will help a lot, in as much that the services can be provided very easily, very quickly, although a little bit costly compared to other alternatives, but they can be used as a means. So I think, yes, they are lacking, but I think generally they are improving, and I don't think it'll be that long before services can be made available throughout the entire country.
All right, we'll be right back in a little bit. We're talking to John Parker, data analyst, head of consulting at RPC Data Limited. How can e-government services enhance service delivery in Botswana's public sector? Very, very needed enhancement. We need efficiency, as we heard our Vice President and Minister of Finance as he was delivering the budget speech, currently being debated in Parliament as we speak. Mokoto?
John, you spoke to capacity building and training, and I've had a rather bizarre experience at one press conference, you know, and I'm not going to mention where. Maybe I should, but I shouldn't. Let me just leave it at a press conference where I observed, you know, government staff, and it was across Africa. It was being chaired by Botswana, but it was happening in other different countries in Africa, and they couldn't find the mute button on Zoom. You know, so one would say, let me mute or unmute, and then the other one is muting on the other side. So it went back and forth for almost an hour at this particular press conference. So for me, I was looking at it, and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we talk a big game when it comes to e-governance, when it comes to integrating a more digital way of doing things, but genuinely considering how, and I'm not gonna say
the capacity to interface the computer.
You know what I mean? It's we're lacking so much, and even we've seen. I'm sure with your elders, and I'm not trying to put out anybody. It's a bit challenging to keep up. You know, they'll even say, oh, so how do you use WhatsApp? So how do we make it interesting for older generations who make the majority of the workforce in terms of civil servants? How do we make it interesting? How do we make it easier also on the pocket in terms of really making sure that this becomes a thing? You know, it becomes internalized, and they're able to use these apps. They're able to use it almost as much as the younger generation would be like, oh yeah, this and that, so that it's more efficient, because I think that's also one stumbling block. An hour. Looking for your mic.
All right, John, your question dragged on there.
That's a very interesting question, and certainly a very interesting observation that you made.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to a comment I made earlier about technology moving. Right? Technology is always moving. Today we're using Zoom, tomorrow it'll be something else.
Yeah.
Okay. And the need to keep up to date with technology, certainly at the interface level, is basically the responsibility of the person using the technology, right?
Yeah.
Now, I do accept that when you get to a certain age group who did not grow up with computers, who were not exposed to computers at school, it becomes a challenge. And this is always going to be a challenge. It was faced, I was in government myself for 10 years. I worked for DIT in the 90s. And it's always difficult introducing new technology to people who have not grown up with it. Part of the solution is that obviously as the older people retire, the newer generation understand the technology better.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is a room for, what's the word I'm looking for? Training, certainly training for the senior people. And government could easily address that. Within the government itself, there are numerous, in fact, thousands of people who understand this technology. And it would be very easy for them to organize some brief training courses for the senior people in government, just on the technology that they have to interface with, particularly when it comes to conference calls, because these are becoming more and more prevalent, certainly since COVID.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
I mean, you know, I still deal a lot with government, and although I prefer in-person meetings, I would say probably 70% of the meetings I have with government are via some form of communication technology. All right. So I think a little bit of training is all that would be required. And certainly, you know, the government has the expertise within itself to organize that. And I think that would go a very long way to resolving that issue.
As a follow-up question, this is not only a problem when it comes to those that use the technology and are delivering the services, but those that are also using the service and asking for services need to also be at a level where they can successfully utilize technology. If I'm in Maung, for example, if I can be able to do the application there. I shouldn't be expected to come to Gaborone to physically deliver
fax.
Exactly. So how do we make sure that not only the government worker but also the customer is able to interface and use it effectively? Will we not then be excluding others if we're using technologies that are not accessible to everyone?
Certainly, I agree with you 100%. There is no point in rolling out technology if it can't be used for one reason or another. But the integral part of any rollout technology is the training of the people who are going to be using it. Right now, this can be done in a number of ways. If it's a big system that government is using, there's a big training program goes around it, and then users are trained, etc. However, when you're looking at rolling out a technology, say, into the rural areas, you need to be a little bit more creative in terms of how you portray what is happening. Government has ways of communicating, right? There's radio, there is television, right? Advertising campaigns. We're rolling out this new technology. They can do videos of how to use the technology, put them onto YouTube, put them onto other social media platforms, right? They can also send people out to do training sessions at community centers and say, right, we're rolling out this new app, just for argument's sake, you were talking about not having to move, right? I've just had a child. How do I apply for a birth certificate, right? So you go to the community center. So this is you run them through the process. This is the app we're using. This is how you do it. And then you appoint somebody who is semi-trained on it. So if they have a problem, they have a local person to go to ask these questions. So they don't have to go running off to Gaborone or anywhere else. They can say, right, there's somebody at the district commissioner's office, or there's somebody at the school, or there's somebody here. If we have a problem, that's who we go to. So you appoint a local champion who is trained a little bit more on how to use these facilities that can then train people who are struggling to use them.
All right. The efficiency of government through digitalization. I mean, the world is moving on. I've walked through airports where I didn't meet a single person in terms of personnel. I was always interfacing with machines.
With technology.
And it was very efficient. It was always a 2-minute job versus a long line where I had to be there for 20 minutes because I had to check in with a person. How do we improve our services in Botswana? Over e-governance with John Parker from RPC Data. We're really looking at our effectiveness. Have we been able to digitalize our e-government services working efficiently? Because them working efficiently would mean that we have an efficient way and we're effective in bringing service delivery. It's an important aspect of effective service delivery. Now, welcoming you back, John, and welcoming you as a listener. You can call us through on 3956-962 to be able to ask our guest questions on your experience as well as on the makeup. As we said, there are two different aspects of it. There is the policy formulation, which we have a policy framework and a statutory framework as Botswana to have e-governance. But is the implementation working the way that it should? So,
all right, Mr. Parker. Let's talk about the country system's performance, and we can consider recent issues, the Gabz system, and the downtimes that it experienced, last year, and maybe still continues to experience. Do you think Botswana's e-governance systems are performing optimally?
I think the honest answer to that has to be no, particularly in terms of the Gabz system. We all know that the challenges that has caused and the effect it's had on the economy, particularly with people not being paid. However, when you look back as to when that system was implemented, and the system was actually implemented in 2004, and if I may say so, it was supported by the company I work for until 2016. And until that point, the system was performing very well. Okay, in fact, to the extent that the people who were in government at the time will tell you that if that system was down for 2 hours, the minister was on the phone. So there were no outages like we're experiencing today. So one would ask, what has caused that? Why have we gone from the position where we had a stable system with virtually no outages to a system that has been down for I don't know how long? As you say, we're not even sure whether it's all up and running at the moment. And I think, we have to look at what is in place and what the government's done, and what has created this. And it appears to me, that it looks like that the system hasn't been supported properly, right? That the people who are engaged to keep the system operational are deficient in some way, right? I don't want to be critical of individual companies or persons. I don't think that's my role. But I think just looking at it from the outside, I think we can all agree that there are challenges there. Yeah. And I think that is probably the root cause of what is going on here. There are also possibly other issues regarding the infrastructure itself, whether the hardware the systems are running on is up to the task of supporting so many users, because Gabz has, in excess of 25,000 users. Yeah. That's a lot of users, okay? Yeah. So there could be challenges with infrastructure, but normally if there's an infrastructure problem, it relates to speed. In other words, the system will run slow. It will not become inoperative, right? Yeah. So I think it's probably a combination of both. And I think, if the government would concentrate on making sure that the systems that they have that are working well continue to work well, and that the infrastructure that is behind those systems is up to the task, these outages can be eliminated. Yeah.
Okay.
Gabz is the prime example, yes.
All right. Now, continuing with the Gabz scenario there, where there has been installation, it has been going on for a very long time. You talked about adaptability and the fact that IT technology is very transitional. It works very fast and it grows and it's innovative and it's always changing. How do we make sure that our framework itself is in a way that we are able to carry maintenance to keep up with the times? Because Botswana itself doesn't have a good track record of maintenance, whether it's our roads, whether it's our government infrastructure. We build it and it's beautiful and we leave it. We don't have a good track record of maintenance. When it comes to IT, what can we effectively say is good maintenance?
I think good maintenance in IT systems is actually no different to good maintenance on a building or a road. When things go wrong, they need to be fixed. All right. IT does have a further challenge though that I mentioned earlier. The technology is constantly moving. Right. Now, most applications, let's just refer to Gabz because we were talking about it, is built on an Oracle ERP system. Right. Now, Oracle regularly bring out updates to their system to incorporate new features, both from a functional point of view as well as security and other aspects of the application. And it's important that these upgrades are done on a regular basis. All right. Now, that can again cause challenges. Now, in the case of the Gabz system, there's a lot of customization. And once you start customizing a base package, when you try to upgrade, sometimes the customizations don't work and you have to redo the customizations, okay, which can make them very difficult to do. So the safe way is, in fact, probably not to upgrade as often as you should. However, you get to the point where the software you're using is no longer supported by the supplier, in which case you are forced to upgrade, and then you have challenges. All right. And I think that happened to Gabz a few years ago, where they went through a major upgrade, and they did have challenges in terms of making the add-ons work with the new application. So the challenge there would be not to customize if you can. If you're using an off-the-shelf package like Oracle ERP, then you need to keep your customizations to a minimum. Or certainly if you are doing customizations, don't build them into the system, build them as add-ons. So you can use the add-ons and you can use what we call APIs to communicate those add-ons to the application, which makes them independent of the application. So if the application is upgraded, the API probably will not need to be updated, and therefore the add-on will not need to be updated either. And therefore you get a seamless integration and a seamless upgrade path without having to redo any work. So I think that's something that should be looked at.
3956962. Send us your WhatsApps at +267 3956962. Fortunately, we'll be able to access them in a few.
All right, John, maybe answering this to an extent that you are prepared to at this stage. Excuse me. In terms of, we've seen a lot of articles that speaks to Botswana being a sitting duck when it comes to maybe things like ransomware and actually just cyber attacks in general. There's been a movement, of course, to curtail some of these inefficiencies, but what can you say in terms of the security of our or information technology infrastructure security currently or at this stage, and looking at emerging threats, of course, as we try to migrate more of our services towards that space?
Thank you. That's a very good question. Cybersecurity is something that is constantly in the headlines of the press. We all hear of cybersecurity incidents. This company's been hacked, that company's been hacked. And as you correctly say, Botswana does have a reputation for being not as secure as other countries are. Yeah. Now, in order to ensure security, there are two aspects to this. One is actually the infrastructures that they're using, in most cases the firewalls, and the software that they're using for intrusion detection and protection. Okay, these are they're not difficult to do. All right, and I think from a point of view of the country being hacked on that level, the incidents are very small. Right. The biggest challenge with hacking is, in fact, emails. Sending out malware. Yeah. People open emails. That gives them the hacker access to their systems, and they go in that way. All right. So that accounts for probably 80% worldwide of intrusions. So hacking is a result of phishing attacks, that's what they call them. All right. And that is prevented by training. Again, an organization, particularly our government, needs an active program regarding cybersecurity with constant refreshing of people to not click on emails if you don't know who it's from, not to open attachments if you don't know they're there. And I'm not saying that needs to be done once a month. It needs to be done literally every day. You know, there should be a sign on top of the computer that says, if you don't know who this is from, do not click. In big letters. Because that is a simple thing that goes a long, long way to actually resolving this problem. And there are simple things one can do. It doesn't cost any money. You know, and that doesn't just apply to government. It applies to anybody, right? Yourselves as well. When you open your emails, I hope you don't click on attachments. No, you don't know who they're from, because you've learned, right? So you know, these are simple things that can be done. But as I say, at the back end, there's a lot of work going on in intrusion. One of the challenges with cybersecurity is what we call zero-day intrusions, or zero-day issues. Those are hacks that happen for the first time. So there is no prevention for them in the software or the firewalls that are being used. And it's only after they've been detected can the fix be put in. Right? Now, if you get hit by a zero-day attack, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. You're going to have a challenge. All right? But I think, sorry if I may, just one final thing. I think with cybersecurity generally, one has to go on the basis that you are not secure. Right? You must assume that everybody's out to get you, and then you must act accordingly.
All right. What I wanted to ask as we wrap up, because we're trying to bring this in perspective as well, we have had a long conversations on where our vulnerabilities are, what we should do better. How do we compare as a country? As we close our conversation, how do we compare as our country in digital penetration, in e-governance, and an ability to carry services and bring services effectively using technology?
How do we compare in relation to other countries?
Other countries, yes. Because I know that Botswana, we only act if we are compared to someone. That's our thing. I think it's a legacy thing.
Yeah, look, that's a very difficult question to answer. You know, certainly if you compare Botswana with first world countries, as you know, I think you mentioned earlier the issue that you can go through an airport without seeing a person. You know, we're certainly not at that stage yet, but we can get there. Right, and the inhibitors are always finance, right? Technology costs money. It does. It's not cheap. All right, particularly the kind of technology you're talking about there. But I think in terms of Africa, you know, given the size of the country and given the population we have and the budget constraints that we have, I think we did pretty well. Okay.
All right.
And I think that we're actually getting better. You know, there's a better awareness of what needs to be done, and I think there is the recognition in government and the motivation to actually improve and to get some of these things in place sooner rather than later. So I think, yes, we maybe need to catch up a bit, but I think everything's in place to make sure we can actually do that.
All right, let's talk about, let's look at the SMSs that have come through. Good morning, Gabz FM. What is said is it's the year 2025. Is government offices still think technology is their enemy? We're still tendering with one original and 4 copies. The government still uses a facsimile in 2025 as a means of communication, yet they seldom answer the actual landlines. People drive around with receipts from transport because the machine usule. Either you wait for it to be repaired or you are forced to drive 100 kilometers to get a license at another station. This has been a problem for the past 20 years. As for the huge government weight bill, I'm still baffled to why we need a director and a deputy PS. Why can't the PS do their job so that they do not need assistant ministers? Another one says e-government was just a looting vehicle for BDP government. It was a dream and it was far-fetched. It's not me, it's the SMSs. This SMS also says I mean, you can't even see. So they sent they sent a screenshot of the website of Parliament, and the accompanying message says, I mean, you can't even see members of Parliament on the government website. The last one says, we should consider that every year, thousands of youth who adapt quickly with a technology get released into a 6-month full spell. This talent can be utilized to assist those that are less familiar. The last one, I did say the last one, but I hadn't finished. Good morning, BHD. We use Oracle ESB as well in our organization, and it works just fine. Using an off-the-shelf system and customizing it, we have heard in government to their own specification caused this major issues. If government wanted a specific integrated needs, they need a bespoke system that allows for all that customization. Altering a finished product will also always present challenges. I hope I read it properly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so no, there's this one I didn't read. Sorry. So talking about having an effective government, they say this will decrease queues on the other hand, being cost-effective, something that will decrease corruption if all means present cyber monitoring in return to maximize alterations of hard prerequisite documents.
Okay, thank you for those questions. I can't comment on specifically on the issues relating to what is on government websites and why they're not populated with information that one would expect to get there. You know, all the issues, in fact, of receipting systems being down and people having to travel long distances. But I think these are consequences of non-delivery, right? And I think this is why we're talking today, is to look at what we can do to improve that delivery. But I think one of the questions or comments to me struck a nerve in as much that they talked about the graduates. All right, we have a lot of IT graduates and we have a lot of unemployed IT graduates, and I think we need as a nation to look at how we can absorb some of these graduates and we can utilize their skills and train them. Right, I talked earlier about maintenance of systems. Right, it's important that systems are maintained by people who know what they're doing. Okay, and the way to make sure that the country becomes self-sufficient in that is for these graduates to be absorbed by local companies that are supporting key government systems and infrastructure. And through those programs, they learn to actually do it themselves so that they become empowered and the country becomes empowered on how to be self-sufficient in that area. If I may, with ourselves within RPC, we have a graduate training program. We have graduate trainees who we employ, and we put them through official training programs on a 1-year program. And at the end of the program, we hopefully offer them full-time employment with the company. And these are on ERP systems which are working within organizations within the country and also systems outside the country. We support a lot of systems outside of Botswana. We don't just operate in Botswana.
Thank you so much for joining us for this wholesome conversation. We've learned a lot, and we will continue to look forward to taking the conversation to the Minister of Communications, Honorable David Tsere, and really finding out how they are improving their services. It's been a pleasure hosting you, John. Have yourself a beautiful day.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the listeners for listening to me. Enjoy your day.